Welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Club. I'm Alice. I'm joined, as always, by Jessamy. Hello.
Hey, Alice. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so fucking excited for today. We are joined with Jordan from Chilled and Fulfilled. I'm going to leave it to you, Jordan. Hello, to introduce yourself and read your bio, please.
Thank you so much. What a great task.
Short and sweet intro there.
Yeah, straight into it. So my name's Jordan Weizman. I'm an accredited canine behaviourist and trainer and the founder of Chilled and Fulfilled. I'm driven by my motto, which is teaching people and transforming dogs. And I'm determined to improve the lives of humans and their dogs through an education in canine psychology, fulfillment, and leadership. My interest in dog training began in 2011 when I adopted my first dog, who came with a range of behavioural issues. I've been working with dogs professionally since 2021, and I primarily work with older dogs with behavioural issues such as pulling on the lead, overexcitement, aggression, persistent barking, destructive behaviour, separation anxiety, you name it. Last year, I resigned from the police force after 9 years to pursue a career as a canine professional in the pet dog space. And I'm loving my new life and the challenges that come with running a business for the first time. I have an Instagram channel with videos depicting the dogs that I work with before and after training, which I've recently found out has generated over 500,000 views in the last 9 months. So,
yes.
Wowzers.
Yeah.
Welcome, Jordan. And
Thank
can
you.
I just say, this is the reason I've been so excited for this episode. And I want to say this up top because I'm so scared that people are going to be like, someone who doesn't have dogs or is a cat person or thinks that this isn't relevant to their life is like tuning out because they're like, oh yeah, that's interesting, but it's a niche. I just want to ask listeners, like, hold on 2 seconds, because this is you exist in such a fascinating realm, right? Where just sort of by a bit of context, like I got a dog 3 years ago and my partner and I at the time got a dog behaviorist in when we got her as a puppy to kind of just teach us how to be good parents or good owners. And something that I found within the space of 45 minutes, this guy had said things about us personally that like cut to the core of me in a way that has taken therapists like 2 years. Like I think at some point he looked at me and just said, you don't have to try so hard to be loved.
Wow.
Like, fuck, man, there it is, right?
Right in there.
Yeah, and it just blew my mind because of course the way we relate to humans and the way we relate to dogs is so connected, right? It's about power, it's about love, it's about boundaries, it's about communication, it's about energy and all these things. So
That's right.
that's kind of just by way of intro and by way of context to anyone listening, regardless of whether you're a dog owner or not. This is such an incredibly fascinating field. So could you maybe give us a bit of background and context? Like, how did you find yourself in this role? Like, what was your journey here?
Yeah, so I kind of, it was by accident. So I've always, when I got my first dog that I spoke about earlier, it was a rescue, spent the first 18 months of his life in isolation. So no socialization at all. And when I say socialization, I don't mean just mixing with other dogs. I mean, he has literally been raised almost to an adult stage in a yard. So that would be the equivalent of like putting a human, like this movie Room. I don't know if you've seen it. This child was raised in a room, and to then go out in the world, everything is terrifying, everything is new and full on, but you're in an adult body, not in the developmental stages. So he had a range of issues, and I had to learn to kind of work through all these fears. And I really enjoyed it. I loved the challenge, learning to understand dogs, how to, motivate them. But I was really just kind of fumbling my way through. Fast forward, I had a trainer at that stage with kind of mixed results. It probably wasn't the right training style for me. And then I kind of didn't realize that there was other styles of training. And so we just carried on. And then after he passed away, I had in that time 2 young kids, and we'd had already another rescue dog that was like, it came to us with a lot of aggression, and I couldn't afford to like take on the risk. So I thought, if I'm ever going to get a puppy, now's the time. So I did that, and I started learning about puppy training, which I'd never experienced. And that really like filled a lot of the knowledge gap that I had, and like something clicked, like everything just made sense to me when I went on that journey to learn how to train a puppy from scratch. And it just filled a lot of the gaps in my knowledge. And so I had amazing results with her as a puppy. And someone stopped me in the street and they asked me, how old is your dog? And I was like, oh, she's 4 months old. And they're just like, wow, she's so calm, she's so relaxed. Do you have a trainer? And I said, I don't, I've just trained her myself. She's like, will you please come and help me? And I was like, sure, love to. Just total stranger. And I actually, before I was in the police force, I was a martial arts instructor. And teaching has always been a primary passion for me. So I just saw this as an opportunity to teach someone and help them with their dog, which I went and did. I went to their apartment. I had no idea like what was going to happen, and they also had a Chihuahua. And
Here, looking at you, Jessamy.
Great. I actually love Chihuahuas. I do. I really do. They're great. So yeah, and so I went and helped her. And I was like, that was so much fun. I really enjoyed that. I was able to impart some knowledge. It was helpful for her. And then I just started to like seek out these opportunities. I thought, I wonder, I'd like to do more, because I have my dog and I'm working with her, but I like the challenge of working with different dogs. And then I just kind of put it out there, and people who I knew who had dogs that had some challenges, I'd kind of reach out to them. Just, if you need any help, I'm really passionate about dog training, maybe I can help you. And then it became a thing where it was like, I want to see if I can actually do this. And it was like dog after dog after dog. I was trying to get more challenging dogs and really find where the limit of my skill set was. And I was just having a lot of success, and people started recommending me, and I was all just doing this as either for free or pay as you please. So people like, dog trainer, pay as you please, gets good results, and is a good teacher. So that just kind of spread pretty quickly. But I was working in the police force at the time. So I took a break from the police and continued to just kind of do this as a hobby. And then it kind of got to a point where I realized I could probably do this full time. And then I decided to do a course. I got some really good advice from a dog trainer in Australia who I really respect. And he said, look, if you want to get into this game, find the best person in the world that's doing what you're doing and go and learn from them. So I went and did that. And there's a guy, his name's Will Atherton. He's my coach. I approached him online and just said, big fan of your stuff. I want to learn. And so I went through a course with him, which was a 6-month course. And it just really just elevated my knowledge base, and again, just filled some gaps in my knowledge and just put it out there. Like, I'm starting this business. And it just once I opened the books up full time and I resigned, it was just great. It was successful. So it's been that's the story.
Yeah, wow. So obviously it's sort of partially happened quite organically. You had a passion for something, you realised you were good at it, it sort of built on its own. But then you also mentioned that there are these sort of various styles of training, right? So is that something you were aware of at the start and subscribed to a particular style, or was there a style that came naturally to you that when you went to follow up to do further learning, you're like, this is the thing that I want to specialise in?
Well, I really enjoyed the most dealing with older dogs with behavioural problems.
Okay.
As opposed to, say, just working with puppies, which I love working with puppies because it's a clean slate and you're just setting them up. But I find the challenge of like overcoming dogs with like really entrenched problems like more fulfilling. And so in the process of even just doing puppy training, it came to my attention there were different styles. And I really just kind of explored that and saw what felt natural for me, and also what felt like made sense to me.
Could you give us just like a very rough overview of
Yeah.
like what those three sort of like mindsets are around training?
There's three like major styles of training. So the first is positive only and force free, and that is kind of as it's described is only using positive reinforcement and not applying force to dogs in order to teach behaviors. So that is one approach, and that's kind of on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum is alpha or dominance theory or compulsion theory, which is a practice of very much using force in the course of training to correct dogs for bad behaviors, but also potentially also used to gain compliance. And there's not much in terms of positive reinforcement. Yes, it exists, but it's generally speaking not using treats or it's just might be praise. So good dog, but there's like a correction or a punishment that's coming after. I sit in the middle, which is what's referred to as balance training, which uses both kind of all the full spectrum of motivation for a dog. So positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. And they're technical terms, but to keep it quite simple, we use basically whatever is ultimately we're to teach the dog new behaviors. We're going to be using reinforcement. So giving the dog something positive or removing an uncomfortable experience for the dog in order to teach them a behavior. And then also, but if the dog is doing a behavior that is undesirable, there is a punishment. And the punishment may include something physical, and there's different ways of doing that. You can use a leash, you can use your hand or whatever. Or there's also other ways to punish with just your voice. Or punishment has quite a negative connotation in the human space and in the dog space. But really all punishment is any action that we take or like an experience, that something that the dog experiences that makes a behavior less likely to, it decreases the frequency or likelihood of that behavior. So if, for example, turning your back on a dog lets the dog know we've removed attention from them, that's a punishment. So that is a punishment. So a lot of people think, punishment is hitting your dog. Well, that may be a that is a punishment potentially, but that's not what punishment is. Punishment is much broader than that. It's just anything that you do to decrease the likelihood or frequency of a behavior happening again. So that's important to define when I'm talking about punishment, because I think a lot of people just go to, whacking your dog or something, which is something I do not practice. I don't teach it. I don't do it. I don't hit dogs.
The concept of punishment in itself is such an interesting thing to unpack, because I think as humans, we have such a different understanding of it. Like even if you think about, say, a debate on like whether kids get smacks or not. I remember as a child, we got smacks, and I remember the day I realized that they weren't painful, and that kind of realization that it was never about inflicting pain. It was around that it was like an unpleasant emotional experience, right? But obviously there's so much more story tied up in that animals don't have. So I think what I'm sort of getting at is this idea of when ego is not involved, it's almost like the weather. Like a thing happens and then I get a result I don't like, but they're not importing it into their story of self. Yeah. They're just like, I do this thing and I get like a result I don't like. Cool, I'm not going to do that thing. It's not a whole thing around, and therefore he doesn't love me, and therefore I'm not worthy of love, and therefore whatever. They're just like, okay, I'm not going to do that.
Well, yeah, I think you've really like hit the nail on the head there, which is, and this is something I talk about in like the first 10 minutes of a conversation with any new client, is that dogs are animals and animals are present. They just live, they're like totally living in the moment in ways that we are now as a community generally like striving to do. pull our heads out of the future and out of the past and just be present. That's like seen now or accepted as like a really healthy practice. So dogs and animals in general are like that. Yes, they can remember things. Yes, they can have traumas that can impact their behavior. And yes, they can predict things, but they're not living in that space like humans do. So it's important, it's fundamental that we understand that about them, and that is how we communicate with them in the moment. And the thing is, if we look at animal behavior and just dog behavior in general, just what you observe at the park as a regular person with no understanding, dogs are correcting each other or punishing each other all the time. Those dogs that might approach your dog and your dog barks and the dog stops, that is a punishment. That is a dog giving a behavior or giving an experience to the other dog that says, stop doing what you're doing, I don't like it. And that can escalate. It might be growling, then barking, it might be a snap, it might be a bite. But like all of those things are natural to dogs. They set boundaries and draw the line and correct each other all the time. And, you know, even just seeing dogs playing, like just there's constantly boundary setting going on there and communication with each other. It's using force a lot of the time. You know, dogs will use force if they need to. So, and I want to clarify. I kind of consider myself a positive first balance trainer, and I say this to my client. All my clients know this. If you are correcting your dog, like a lot of the time, something's gone wrong. Most of the time we want to be positively reinforcing our dog. If we're going too far, if our dog is failing, causing us like failing in the behavioral challenge that we're putting them under, so whatever we're dealing with, if they're constantly failing, where we need to respond to the failure, like it's important that we're calm and consistent in our approach there, but something's gone wrong. We need to set our dogs up for success. We need to challenge them, but also challenge them in a way where they're likely to be successful, and finding that threshold of where it's hard for them, but we want them to make the good decision. And we're not always going to be able to tell where that is. Like that is the skill in dog training, is like knowing where your dog's threshold is and really like dancing on that boundary. And because when you have success there, you start to push that. If you're too far into the kind of easy zone, they're not gonna learn. So we need to get them close to the boundary and then move that boundary. But occasionally they're going to make mistakes, and we need to respond to that. So yeah,
it's so fascinating because I can't of course remember exactly what it is off the top of my head, but a very similar model for human learning, and that's where people find satisfaction in their work, is on that edge where it's got to be like difficult enough or like pushing you enough to the edge where it's a challenge, but not so hard that it's impossible.
Yes.
And dancing on that line is a really fine balance for both humans and dogs.
Yeah, totally. Because there's a human element to the challenge, and then the dog's element to the challenge. And for most people, you know, I always say you need to set yourself up for success and your dog. It has to be both. Because if you push your dog too far, they're not going to enjoy the experience of training. It's going to be too hard. They're going to fail too many times. You're going to correct them. That's not good for your relationship. And that has been my experience with that. Because when I was originally trained many years ago with my other dog, it was that dominance theory approach. And yes, I got results with that, but one of the results of that was that my relationship with my dog wasn't particularly good compared with what, in my experience, a more balanced approach. Now I have like an incredible relationship with my dog, and that's obvious. Like the behavior is just very different. My dog loves being challenged, loves it. And that's what you're describing there. We need to be fulfilled in our activities. We need a little bit of stress. We need a bit of challenge. Not too hard that we're failing all the time, but not too easy that it's mindless.
And I would imagine that would build trust as well in the dog, because if you're setting your dog up to succeed in those moments where you are asking a bit more of them, they are trusting that you know that they can do it. Yeah. So they're leaning into that, versus like if you're asking something that's unrealistic or you're jumping 5 steps ahead, and you've done that repeatedly, it's like they've got no evidence that they can do what you're asking, and that, you know, would feel really unsafe, I would imagine.
Totally. We do. You have to build a relationship of trust with your dog, and that is exactly like it's to take small steps and, again, make your dog feel like, oh, I can do this, you know? And this is particularly important with overcoming fears, that, like, you know, some dogs are scared to jump up on something. Like getting into the car is something I've dealt with a lot. The dog just doesn't want to go in the car. But once it's in there, it's fine. Getting out of the car is fine. But just like, it's awkward. There's a bump, like the side of the door and the step, and it goes down, it goes up. So to get your dog to overcome that, you have to have a leadership relationship with your dog, which is the first thing that I teach in the first session. And really, like, the underlying, skill set that we need is to learn how to have a leader-follower relationship with our dog. Without that relationship, if our dog doesn't respect us as a leader and doesn't trust us as a leader, they're not going to trust you when you're guiding them to overcome challenges. So it's kind of mandatory, if you're training with me, that we fix the relationship first before we tackle any challenges, like challenging behaviors, like reactivity or separation anxiety, all this stuff. We have no authority, and we really have, it's too hard for the human and too hard for the dog to go in on the first session and deal with those problems, in my experience. Unless we get the relationship right first, the dog's going to be set up for a much more successful experience.
So can you unpack a bit what that looks like to have a healthy leadership dynamic with your dog? Like what are some of the behaviors on the human side and the dog side that you could kind of look for in a relationship?
So firstly, that from the human side, that the way in which we're communicating with our dog, or the right state or energy, is calm and assertive, calm and confident. So we are still, someone who's calm and confident is able to set boundaries and will, you know, consistently set those boundaries and deal with problem behaviors. But at the same time, it's not from a space of emotional reactivity. So often when what I see with dogs out in the street is very frustrated owners who are yelling at their dog or are embarrassed by the situation, and they feel that social pressure, I need to be doing something with my dog, and they'll look at the dog, oh, why can't you be more like that other? Oh, that's what you should be doing. And you can just see, like, there's just so much frustration there, and it's very hard. And I get it. Like, I've been in that space. Everything that I teach now, I have made these mistakes. Everything that I speak about as, like, this is not what to do with the dog, I have done it all. And so I really feel how it's so easy to make these mistakes and relate to your dog in that way, because unless you learn how dogs are different from humans and how to relate to them, it's very hard. So coming back to your question, from the human side, calm, assertive, calm and confident is kind of what we need to be with our dogs. So we need to know when an undesirable behavior comes up, we need to be able to respond to that just with a clear knowing of what to do, so that we can just do it calmly. And really, that's just an opportunity for us to teach our dog. What we'd look for really in a dog is a dog that is looking up for guidance and direction from the human. So a dog that is checking in with you on the walk, a dog that before I enter a space, I am walking first. I am going into the house first. I come out of the house first. I want my dog to feel that all of her needs are met by me, and all she needs to do is just check in with me. I'll provide her safety, her exercise, her mental stimulation, her food, her joy, everything. That all comes through me. So you just need to check in with me. And what that does is it helps the dogs to just switch off and relax. It's kind of like, just being on holiday, not having to worry about your own safety, your security, your well-being. It's all taken care of. Just hang out with this person. And that I don't know if you've seen some of the videos, but you see these dogs who are going out for their daily walk, which is supposed to be for the dog, the activity of, and for the human, but it's supposed to be like a good thing for the dog. And these dogs are like hyper vigilant. Their ears are up. They're like rushing at the tree, rushing at the dog. Some of them barking, lunging. There's nothing about that is like relaxing for the dog. Sometimes, the human mind will say, "Oh, that's my dog's just really excited," and we interpret on a human level, excitement is joy and joy is positive. But really, for a dog, it's high states of arousal and high states of adrenaline, and it's not healthy to be in that state for extended periods of time. Imagine a human walking down the street, wanting to greet every person that they walk past. And every time they see a park, they go into a full adrenalized state.
Yeah.
You would get help for that human very quickly. They can't cope in the world.
It makes so much sense because before you do a public speaking event or go on a date or any of these like when you get like high adrenaline before something, there is always that moment where you're like, I'm really nervous. No, wait, I'm excited. No, wait, I'm nervous. And you can kind of, I suppose as a human, you can, with a bit of self-awareness, try channel that into excitement. But yeah, just more to the point that those two emotions are really tightly physically similar. I mean, basically they're the same pathways, but it's really easy to project the narrative you want onto your dog when actually they're just hyper aroused and they're not feeling like you're the alpha. So they've got to do that defensive work for the pack.
Yeah, that's right.
That projection, I think, is a really interesting thing. And I am 100% guilty of this, have been guilty, continue to be guilty because it's so hard. I think particularly probably now more than ever, like our dogs are such parts of our family. We don't have kids. Our dogs are, they play that role in our lives. And even though I, like with my brain, know that they are dog and I am human, it's almost impossible to divorce those things in my mind because they're such an important part of my family. But it's something that's come up again and again talking to dog trainers or people who have been through dog training that like you have to remember that your dog is a dog.
Yeah, that's right.
It isn't a human. So I don't know if you have any like tips of or experience around like how when they are so intertwined with our family and we love them and we do kind of treat them like they're people in so many ways. How do we identify when we're actually doing something detrimental for the things that we love so much by trying to do the right thing?
Yes. That's a great question. And it's there's two things that I talk about. So when I start first session, I say dogs are animals. That's the first line that I'm talking about. And there's two reasons that that's important. One is what we spoke about, dogs are present. And the other thing is they're not humans. And it's so important to recognize that the actual, what's underlying how we relate to our dogs, because we need to deeply consider what is of benefit to our dog and what we are doing to satisfy our own needs. And I think for a lot of people, when, like I'm sure you experience this going down the street, most dog owners do, you come across someone who particularly likes your breed, and the first thing they do is like crouch down to go and give affection to your dog, right? Now, that is natural for a human, and that is purely a human satisfying their own needs to want to give affection to a dog. It makes us feel good to give affection to a dog. A lot of people get dogs for that simple reason. I love cuddling dogs. I like their energy and I want to do that more. So I want to have one of my own. However, giving affection to a dog is giving something valuable to a dog if the dog likes affection. Some dogs don't. So if you give a dog affection, you might get a bite if the dog doesn't like to be touched. So there's that as a side note. But when we give our dogs something that they value, they are making an association between the behavior that they're doing at that time, because they're present, and they're associative learners. So they're like, I'm receiving something good. What am I doing now? And they pair that. So similarly, like when we're teaching a dog to sit, we give it food. It pairs the receipt of something valuable with doing the behavior. So they give us the behavior more. This is what reinforcement is. So when we think of giving affection to a dog as reinforcement, and we know that every time we give our dog something valuable, we're teaching them something about the behavior that they're giving us at that time. So now it's like, what am I teaching my dog when I'm about to give my dog affection because I want to, but what am I teaching my dog in this moment? Because if my dog is jumping up or they're barking at another dog or they're biting me and I want it to go away, so I give it affection, or I don't even regard what the behavior is, I'm just going to give them affection because I want to give them that. Well, I would say that is not really, once you understand this, that's not really loving your dog.
Yeah.
That's like meeting your own needs above the dog's without considering, hey, I'm actually teaching you something.
That's the way you've said that's just made this light bulb kind of go on in my head I heard once someone was speaking about investment and they were like, you don't get to choose not to invest. It's like, you don't have to buy shares, you don't have to buy a house, but that is still, choosing not to invest is still an investment decision. And it kind of feels like you don't get to choose whether or not you train your dog.
Yeah.
You are always training your
100%.
dog. So it is whether you are equipping yourself with tools to do that in a way that is healthy for both of you or not. But either way, you are training your dog constantly.
That's right. Totally. You're 100%. And you, Jessamy, you may have noticed, like when I came into your house, I didn't pay any attention to your dogs. I looked at you and that there was a whole internal battle going on. I'm the dog guy, I'm coming in, I'm talking to you and I'm completely ignoring your dogs out of pure love and respect for your dogs.
Yeah.
And I know that perhaps for you, maybe is going on like, he's not even acknowledging my dogs. He's not giving them a cuddle. He doesn't want to hold them.
Can't he see how beautiful they are?
Can't he see they're amazing? Like, does he even like dogs?
They're the best ones.
I have checked, that's true.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
I go in and all I want to do, even knowing this, it doesn't change. All I want to do every time I go to a client's house is get on the floor in the hallway of their house and cuddle their dog and let it jump on me and lick me because I don't mind. But it's just, I know that I am then teaching the dog that behavior. And there are people in this world, young children in particular, old people and older people, and people who are afraid of dogs, who if I taught the dog that and they did it to that person, I would be contributing to that person's harm. That's how I see it. So I feel not only as a professional, I have a responsibility to relate to dogs in the way that I'm teaching, but it's not that, and I just want to be clear, and I'm not suggesting for a second that you don't give affection to your dog. I love giving affection. I give abundant affection to my dog, but I choose my moments.
Yeah.
So like, for example, when I came in here with Blossom earlier, I just asked you, just don't pay attention to her. I waited till she was calm, seated, and she was checking in with me on her place. And you said, can I give her a pat? And I looked at her and I said, go on, because that's what she wants. But she's giving me the behavior first. And that makes, that is, she's a powerful dog and it's important. She doesn't rush up to people demanding that. But it's important. Yeah, it's important for her. It's important for me and for other people. I feel like we have a real responsibility. So it is. And this is the gift of dog training is like really reflecting on how much am I actually meeting my dog's needs for their well-being and their benefit as an animal that's different to human? Or am I just kind of just doing whatever I want because I love doing these things and nothing can get in the way of that?
And it's, go for it.
No, I was just going to say, I'm interested to know how that continues to play out in other parts of your life, because I imagine there's no way that can't rub off this sort of idea of love as action. Yeah. And it's not always going to be kisses and cuddles and going on holidays. Like sometimes love is really hard and it doesn't look like what we think of when we think of love. Do you think that's impacted your other relationships as a offshoot of?
Yeah, well, I think, to be honest, the practice of remaining calm with dogs when I'm communicating and setting boundaries totally spills over into I have 2 young kids, 2 toddlers.
Yeah.
And I now see their tantrums as a totally natural, normal behavior, that rather than being emotional reactive, I do what I do very naturally with dogs, I'm now applying in the human space. And I'm trying, it's much harder for me because they are humans and they're talking, but I also see great benefit in just setting boundaries calmly and assertively and allowing them to have their tantrums, just like, and I don't mean in the same, like I wouldn't allow a dog to like completely lose control, carry on. I'd need to end that quickly. Similarly with a human, I'm not going to allow my kids to be unsafe. I'll intervene physically if I need to grab them, if they're throwing things or hurting someone. But then it's just about, okay, this is a learning moment. Just be present and what do I need to do to give the right guidance here and to hold space for them and build trust. And that's definitely something I've got from dog training that I'm very grateful for.
Yeah. Sorry, Jessamy, your question was perfect. I was going to ask something similar to that, which is exactly on that idea of love and how having a pet puts the idea of love and power into quite an awkward conversation. And the thing is, it's always there. Like there are status dynamics and power dynamics between the second you have more than one animal in a room, there is a power dynamic. Like that's just automatically created. We don't like to admit that as humans with our loved ones. It's icky. It feels gross. And we don't like to admit that with our pets, which is, I think, why a lot of people avoid the responsibility of taking kind of active ownership and responsibility for being a leader to their dog, because we don't want to do that. Like we're like, no, it. And I think your work is so fascinating because it shows us, or it really like brings to the fore this idea of like being observant about how we love and why we love, right? And how much, even when you were speaking about the pat thing earlier, like I know I do that with my dog. With my dog, I definitely I self-medicate through loving her sometimes, right? And I think that is also okay sometimes. I think that's fine. We do, that is relating to anyone. But owning it is important and kind of seeing it for what it is, and then being able to step into power and being comfortable with having power over another life and not shying away from the responsibility that comes with that, which is all a very long preamble to the next question. But what I wanted to ask, so it relates to power, and I noticed when you came in earlier and once you'd greeted the humans and kind of settled Blossom and you'd gone downstairs and you were meeting Jessamy's dogs, and that was Pickle and that was Chi-Chi, and the first question you asked was, who's boss? So I just wondered if you could speak a bit more about that idea of like who's boss and like what does that mean, and how do you think about power dynamics?
I always like, when there's two dogs, I'm always interested to know, like there's always a dog that is genuinely more dominant. They will sort that out themselves. And sometimes there are a few factors that can play into that, the sex of the animal, but not always the case, but then also the age of the animal. So like an older male dog would more often be dominant to a younger female dog, but then sometimes you have older female dogs who are dominant. It's just I find it interesting. And so in your case, you were sharing that your younger dog was more dominant. And I just find it fascinating just that there are kind of generalities about this sort of behavior, but they change. I've been in situations where, older male dog was submissive to a younger female dog. I've had that dynamic in my house. And it was just interesting to observe because it wasn't expected. And when something's not expected, that's like, that kind of pricks my interest.
Does it change between animals? Like, is it good to have a clear dominant, if you've got multiple animals in a space, is the ideal to actually just have one that is the boss? Or does it change? Because I think as humans, we're quite uncomfortable with the idea of favoritism.
Yeah. And look, the idea of dominance and submission is, in the English language, when you speak about that in human culture, it's like, ooh, it makes us feel ill inside that a human is dominant or this. In the animal world, that is their reality. They are not striving to all be equal in a society like we are. In the animal world, and it might be, it's totally relationship dependent. An animal will assert dominance over another animal. The other animal will be submissive. The submissive animal isn't like, oh no, I'm submissive, I want to be dominant. They're submissive, that's them. They're okay with that. Yeah. That's also part of how they're surviving and fitting in with the pack. It's when this dog approaches me, I lay on my back, I'm avoiding conflict, and that's it. And the other dog is like, I want to check you out. I kind of might challenge that other dog or whatever, that other animal, and that plays out. Now, having this idea of kind of having equal would probably present, in my opinion, more problems. Like 2 male dogs of similar age, you're going to have a lot of fighting because the dogs, unless one of them is generally very assertive, confident dog, that will sort itself out. But again, male dogs, similar age, will fight for this exact reason. They're in a similar space, similar experience, similar, maturity level, and they're going to challenge each other. So, yeah, if you want to avoid conflict, the best thing to do is to consider what dog do you have and what's the one you're introducing, to not get 2 dogs at the same time. Wait until you have one dog that is stable and mature, because that dog is going to play a significant teaching role to your younger dog. And if you bring 2 dogs in together, it is not twice as much work, it's 3 times. You've got each dog and then the dynamics, which is a whole thing. Dog dynamics is like managing that, knowing how to deal with all of that stuff. It is, I certainly, from a training and behavior perspective, I don't recommend it, because all you need to do is just wait a couple of years, nail that first dog. Because if that first dog has behavioral problems that you're going to need to work on for a while, you might reconsider getting that second dog, because you don't know what your dog's going to develop into. So let's feel out that dog, get it right, get your skills up, then introduce another one if you want it. Not because you think your dog needs companionship. This is the other very, I'd say, a common perception, is that I want my dog to have a friend. I don't want them to be alone. Again, these are very human concepts. Or maybe I don't have enough time to exercise my dog, so I want them to have another dog to play with. And then they'll tire each other out. So in my opinion, this is not a good idea. Firstly, we need to make sure that, your dog, as much as they might enjoy the company of other animals, if you're meeting your dog's needs fully every day, you're home, when you come home from meeting your dog's needs, exercise and stimulation and all that stuff, your dog is pretty much in a state to rest, depending on the dog. But most pet dogs, they're just resting. And you being around, or even if you're not around, they're just resting at home. They're not being in isolation for a dog, they don't have this feeling of loneliness, pining for companionship. You are their pack, you are their companion. And as long as you're fully meeting your dog's needs and you have time for that and you're taking on that responsibility, that is what your dog wants. Your dog wants you. And the other thing is introducing another dog. Dogs, they don't just get along. They might not. There might be real conflict there. You might introduce a dog and it completely shakes the stability that your first dog has had. Then you've brought about conflict. You're now having to potentially isolate the dogs to prevent the fights. And they're now living, 2 dogs with worse lives than if they were living just on their own. So there's like a whole lot of risk with introducing a second dog. And the main thing is you just do it for you, because you want to have the experience of 2 dogs, not this idea that you're going to solve your dog's potentially imaginary emotional problems by getting them a companion.
Oh my God. Imaginary emotional problems should be that
should be the name of this podcast. Yeah. I remember someone, firstly, I'm very glad that someone gave me that advice, because we were going to get a second dog much earlier. And they were like, just wait a couple of years till Chi-Chi is a bit older for exactly those reasons. And I'm very glad that we did. I mean, Pickle's still a nightmare anyway, but that's a whole other story. But someone also described it to me a bit like housemates. You know, if you're living in a share house, sometimes you'll have a housemate that you really fucking hate. Sometimes you'll have a housemate that will be a lifelong friend. And sometimes you have housemates that are just there, like they're fine. You don't really bother each other. But you're not like best buddies. You're just in the same space. And of course, dog relationships are the same. It could be anywhere along that spectrum, right? So it's kind of fascinating. The other thing that was really interesting in getting a second dog, because Chi-Chi was our first dog. I've always been a dog lover, never got to have a dog growing up because we had a cat that lived for fucking ever. She was a beautiful cat, but she lived till she was like 22. Like I'd moved out and Mum's line was always like, oh, when Maggie passes on, we can talk about getting a dog. But, you know, that ship had sailed by then. So, yes, all this to say, Chi-Chi was our first dog, absolutely in love with her. And getting Pickle, just noticing the like extreme personality differences. Of course, you understand that animals have personalities, but because they're so opposite, they do get along really well despite their big personality differences, which is lucky and wonderful. But it was such a fun thing to see because we had them both from puppies as well. Yeah. Their little personalities unfold over time.
That's so great. That's so great. And I think probably because their personalities are different, that's probably why they get along.
Okay.
I think that would contribute. Just like if you've got a dominant dog and a submissive dog, they're actually going to be quite fine. The submissive one knows its place. The older one will set some boundaries with that dog. Don't go on my bed. Don't go on this. The dog will make that mistake once. The other dog will correct it. And then it's like, cool, not my bed.
Yeah.
But that's it. There's an order there. There's structure. There's boundaries. And I described 3 things that are needed to fulfill your dog: activities, boundaries, and calm, consistent leadership. And that B is boundaries. I think this is the part that humans feel, I don't want to set boundaries with my dog. I actually want my dog to be everywhere in the house. Because it feels mean. There's like a feeling of I don't want to be setting a boundary or saying no to a dog is mean. And what's interesting, and I did a post on this just last night, that like when I talk about this concept with raising children, that this is relevant for people with kids, but I think anyone without kids can really just understand this concept. Imagine raising a child without setting any boundaries or saying no. I give the specific example of my toddlers absolutely love ice cream like most kids. Now, when I pass an ice cream shop, I have an option. I can get them an ice cream every single time because they're asking for it and I don't want to be mean. Or I could avoid going to any ice cream shops because I don't want to have to deal with that challenge. Or I could actually teach them that I know you want an ice cream now and I know we're passing the shop, but now's not the time to have an ice cream, and accept the challenge of doing that to create a resilient, balanced, healthy human being and dog that can cope with being in situations that trigger excitement, that trigger arousal, and they are capable of not having it and looking up for guidance and direction, saying, can I have it, please? That's the dog's way of asking politely. And then I can also cope with me saying, yes, go say hello to that person, or go play with those dogs, or no, now's not the time. We're going to keep walking. So when we think about it like that, it's like, of course you need to set boundaries. People in the street will tell you, control your people are happy. But with dogs, it's like, I don't want to do that. That's mean. Yeah. That's mean. And then because we're not dealing with human beings, it's not something that we can talk to them and have a conversation about. We have to communicate with them in the language they understand. Dogs understand body language, growling, and biting. That's their language. There's fur communication, eye communication, intense body language. Dogs are not standing around chit-chatting about their days. They're acting on instinct with like quite a simple but still quite intricate like communication system. So the idea for me to set boundaries with a dog without ever using any force, or without ever being assertive with a dog, claiming space or saying no to a dog that wants to interact with another dog just doesn't feel natural or healthy for that dog. And that's what I see a lot of. Dogs that have never had someone tell them they can't have it. Yeah. So, of course, they grow up not being able to cope with not having it. And then they give you all the behaviours to demand those things, barking, lunging, whatever, doing the puppy eyes as well. That's a good one. All right, you can have it.
Even if I'm like
I'm
imagining
so
my
guilty. I'm
dog's
so
puppy eyes
guilty.
right now. And I'm like,
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing as well, because like you say, they would communicate physically. And I've seen often with people, and I'm also guilty of this, of course, that mismatch or that discrepancy between what your words are saying and what your body language is saying.
Yeah.
And often, like I'll see a dog that's kind of like jumping up on someone because it's excited, and we'll be like, no, get down. And you're kind of like, sort of, you're telling them to get down, but obviously they are not going to be understanding your English words.
Exactly.
But energetically what they're getting is like that action. You're going, no. So they kind of, that would register as positive to them, surely.
Totally. Absolutely.
And then you're like, well, that's weird.
And this is the classic case with reactive dogs. The dog will lunge. The dog will lunge at a dog, and we put tension on the lead because we want to stop the dog. Put tension on the lead, and then we'll crouch down to the dog. It's okay. And we'll pat the dog, soothing the dog, calming it down, thinking, I've just got my dog in a calm state, right? Without realizing the dog does not understand what we're saying. It understands what we're doing. So firstly, patting the dog is positive and affection from the owner. If your dog likes it, that is a reward. So dog has been reactive. We then go down and we pat the dog, putting tension on the lead. Tension on the lead, particularly on a harness, but also on a collar, builds frustration, builds drive. So the more you put tension on that lead, the more your dog wants to pull towards that thing, because it's like it's kind of like dangling a carrot in front of it and not letting it get it. So if you, in the police space, in protection sports, dog sports and protection training, when you are training a dog to, bite a person or to have huge levels of drive, to go and pursue something, put them on a lead. Don't let them have it. Put tension on that lead and give them soft, soothing pats. And you create a dog that is like, give me that thing.
Wow.
Right?
Oh, no.
Yeah, right. Which is like in the moment you might, and particularly with small dogs, and I'm not, obviously I don't know your relationship with your dog, but I'm like, I know you've got 2 small dogs.
Yeah.
The easiest thing to do is pick up the dog. Picking up a dog is like the highest value affection you can give a dog. Dog's reactive, easy thing, pick up the dog. The behavior stopped, you've protected the other person, but the dog's getting huge levels of affection. So in that moment, solves the problem, but you will probably find it happens again and again and again. We pick up the dog, we give it affection, it stops. But in the dog's mind, I know exactly what to do when a dog comes past. Rah, 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 bang, affection.
Yeah. Stop
doing that. Pat, 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 calm, in my arms, high level affection. And the dog's like, oh yeah, I know what mama wants.
Isn't it so interesting? Because it's just, we're animals too. In all of this, it's so easy to forget that we are also animals. And just hearing this, it's like, what creates desire more than not allowing someone to have something? It's like the most simple psychology ever. You're like, you want the thing? No, I'm just going to hold it just out of reach.
Yes, yeah.
So this is you mentioned, so your sort of principles for a happy, healthy dog, and was the ABC. So you said activity, boundaries,
and calm, consistent leadership.
Calm and consistent. And I feel that we've discussed boundaries. We've sort of touched on this idea of calm and consistent leadership. And obviously they're all interwoven.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if we could speak a bit more about activity and how, just in general, how people should think about that.
Yeah, so activities, I call it activities and not exercise, because I actually think most people that I've dealt with do like a pretty reasonable job of exercising their dog. and exercise, physical exercise, super important for your dog, regardless of their breed. And the exercise needs of the dog will vary. Some dogs, there's like really not much of a limit you can put on the exercise. If you've got working dogs like Kelpies and Collies and Shepherds, those dogs, particularly if you've got a working line dog, those dogs literally are designed to run on a farm and herd all day. All day they're working, and then they come home and rest at night, and they're ready to go in the morning. So exercise is one part of it, but the other part is the mental exercise. And I think a lot of people think of mental stimulation or mental exercise as sniffle mats, smelling things, puzzles, and those are all great. They're good, but they're what I would call passive mental stimulation. Versus what's much more powerful for your dog is, and for your relationship and in terms of fulfilling your dog, is active mental stimulation, which is where you are engaging with your dog and they are having to think that they need to do something in order to receive rewards. So we're kind of turning your dog into a working dog. And it doesn't need to be this kind of transactional exchange of like reward for behavior. But at the very least, the fundamental, we want your dog to be following you. If you want a dog that is looking up for you for guidance and direction, that is less likely to be reactive, making these decisions for its own safety, how you walk your dog makes a huge difference. So, for example, I worked with a German Shepherd who was a working line German Shepherd, didn't quite cut it for the police force and ended up with a family. And this dog was being exercised for 2 hours every morning. They were running the dog, throwing the ball, doing fetch and walking. The dog pulled hard, was totally and then would come home even after all that exercise, and it was still like just jumping on the counter and running around and barking at everything. It was still like had lots of pent up energy. I took the dog for 40 minutes and it came home and slept for 4 hours, right? So I did less exercise, but what I did in that time was give the dog a job. And the job is follow me. So all of that focus on the external world, pursue this impulse, pursue that impulse, all that like low-level stress and anxiety was like, hey, cut that out, focus on me. All your job is to follow me. So if I turn, you turn. If I go up on this thing, you're coming up with me. I go up the stairs, you come up. Now the dog is getting exercise, but it has a job, and the job is just to focus on me. And because it's focused on me, it's less reactive to other dogs. It's not worrying about its safety. Anytime it makes a decision to go into that leadership role and, advocate for its own well-being, no, I'll take care of that. And I let the dog know through my demonstration that you don't need to worry about those other dogs. You don't need to worry about those things. I'll take care of those for you. I'll give you breaks. I'll let you have free time, but it all comes through me. So the difference is, and again, going back to the kids example, letting your kids go and play at the park. They run around, they go on the slide, they go on this. There's often a lot of conflict at the park between kids, right? Versus that child in a soccer game. There's rules, there's boundaries, there's objectives, and you're working as a team. They're still running around, they're still doing stuff, but they're constantly using their brain. And just like when you sit down for an exam, you're seated, but you're using your brain for an hour and you could go to sleep after. So if we want to meet our dog's needs fully, we need to meet both their physical needs and their mental needs. And so like learning how to do that is what I teach. So your walk can become relaxing and draining for your dog. And you come home and chilled and fulfilled.
Yeah. I love that. I want that. I want that for me and for my dogs. I'm interested, there must be, I imagine, post-pandemic, post-lockdowns, a whole range of new issues that are coming forward. You started in 2021, right? Is that?
Yeah. It was
like
kind of the tail end of the COVID wave. But certainly I'm now overwhelmed with work that are issues coming out of kind of post-pandemic dogs. People had a lot of time. They invest a lot of time relationship with their dog. Now they're going back to work. And the main thing is either there's two issues, is lack of socialization, and socialization not meaning just getting dogs together. That is not just what socialization is. It's about exposing your dog to the world. So potential triggers. So being around trams, trucks, construction noise, thunder, lightning, all this stuff, skateboards that are triggering for a dog. People weren't out and about. They weren't, doing those sorts of things. So now there are some dogs that haven't had many of those life experiences in their critical development period and are fearful. And dogs that are fearful tend to be reactive and the greatest risk of a bite. Because if you're scared of things and you are triggered, well, what other option does that dog have to try and make the thing go away? I'm going to bark, and if a bark doesn't work, I'm going to bite. So there's that, and then also the separation. The dogs were never taught to be resilient by having time alone. People, I think, took for granted prior to the pandemic, it wasn't a conscious thing. No one thought, better give my dog alone time. They just went to work.
Yeah.
The dog learned to cope with the routine of being alone and then being together. Now they've been raised in an environment only having company, and then all of a sudden they've matured and they haven't had that alone time. So dogs that weren't crate trained or weren't crate trained properly, or owners with the awareness that this is a problem, that we're actually with our dog all the time. In a couple of years, this might not be the same. We need to give our dogs some alone time, and doing that in a way that's supportive for the dog. So lack of socialization and separation anxiety or separation-based behaviors, like demanding behaviors, are a real thing at the moment.
Yeah. Luckily ours hadn't experienced any separation anxiety, very happy to be on their own, which is good, but absolutely the lack of socialization for people has been a huge problem. And it's interesting to see the difference, because we were so conscious and so careful with Chi-Chi because we had the great opportunity of having her from a puppy. We took her everywhere. She went to puppy school. We would just, put her in our bag and take her everywhere in those sort of like first 100 days, which is critical for both dogs and humans, apparently. And we just didn't get the same opportunity with Pickle because we were locked in our house, and stupidly, I think, made some assumptions like, well, she's got Chi-Chi there, she's been around a dog, that's got to be something. But you described pretty much exactly her, mainly with other dogs is the main problem. And she's tiny. So, the stakes are low, but it can't be comfortable for her existing in the world like that. And she's only 2, so I feel like there's hope for her.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm interested to know what that sort of learning journey, whether it's separation anxiety or socialization, if you sort of miss that critical development period, how much harder is it then to go back and sort of fix those problems?
Well, it's hard to answer that question. The first thing I'd say is you can definitely improve your dog. I mean, you, the audience, you specifically as well. There's a lot that you can do with older dogs. And this is why I like working with older dogs. A lot of people ask me, isn't my dog too old to be doing this? And it's like, no, your dog can develop a lot, either completely resolving these behavioral issues with the right guidance from you, or they'll just be a lot better than they are now. And, depending on how far you want to take it and you're prepared to kind of do that work is, as far as your dog can go. And I'm not going to stand here and sit here and say you can just resolve every dog's problem, carte blanche. There's just, we're dealing with animals depending on the cause of the issue, what kind of trauma or issues they've had. But largely, you can do a lot to help your dog. So yes, it's harder when because it's easily avoidable if you know what to do in that imprint period, so that kind of earlier stage of life. But yeah, there's a lot you can do. So separation anxiety, I think, is a term that gets thrown around a lot, and a lot of it is actually just demanding behaviors. So a lot of people think their dog has separation anxiety, but it's actually just learned behavior by the dog that in order to get the thing that I want, which is usually just attention, I just need to bark. I bark and I bark and I bark. You get annoyed, but then if I keep barking, you eventually let me out, or you let me in, or you give me something, right? You reinforce the behavior. So when we give our dogs something when they're barking, which is often we're doing it because we just want the barking to stop. Some people they'll tie their dog up outside, they go into the coffee shop, bark, 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 and they're like, oh, they quickly run back to the dog and untie it to end the barking. For everyone, what have they done? They've just taught their dog, if you want me to come back quickly, just keep barking. And if it doesn't work, bark harder. Start running around and spinning around on the lead like you're having a panic attack. And then and I'll come back to you. So obviously it's very human there's no judgment here. Of course, if you don't have that understanding, you're just going to go to your dog and end the behavior and feel like you're doing the right thing for your dog. So I have a lot of sympathy just because I was doing these things. And it's just so easy to do. Why wouldn't you? It's almost and this is where the crux of it is, like, dealing with dogs' behavior is often counterintuitive and it's countercultural. It's like if you were to come out of the shop and your dog barks and you stood there waiting for your dog, the moment that your dog stopped barking, everyone would be looking at you like, can you just untie your dog, please?
Yeah.
So that I fully appreciate how much social pressure there is to do certain things. Even today, someone just came up to me, started patting Blossom, and I just said, sorry, mate. Sorry, she doesn't. I just said, she doesn't like that. No, thank you. That was really hard. And that's hard for me as a trainer and an advocate of people to advocate for their dogs. And it's not for any reason. The real reason I said no, thank you, is I'm trying to teach her. At the moment, she's going through a bit of a regression, and she started like jumping on people and just like almost like rushing up to someone for a cuddle. So I'm doing a lot of work just to show her that not every person you approach is going to give you that affection. That stranger coming in and patting is not helping me at all. It's not helping Blossom. Again, they're just kind of meeting their needs. So I kind of lost my train of thought.
No, it's super interesting because that's exactly what I was thinking as well, Jordan, with the difficulty of balancing doing what's right for your dog and not being just like a burden on society when your dog is barking or behaving badly and you want to remove them from the situation for the sake of all of the other humans and or dogs there. That's a really kind of hard
it's hard.
Balance.
It is. It's really hard. And this is where the training comes in. It's like, how do we set our dogs up for success? If that's the challenge you're having, do the work away from people. You can do that exact scenario. I was working on this with a client just the other day. We just went to a side street. We just we tied him up, tied up the dog. We just walked 30 meters away, came back, dealt with the behavior. We waited for the dog to be calm before we came back. So we let that, and we were using a few different techniques that were at distance to the dog, because obviously we're not in close proximity to the dog. So we were trying a few different things to see what was effective for that dog, but we only returned to the dog when he was quiet. And he very quickly got the program. When I bark, you go further away. And when I'm quiet, you come closer. That's interesting. We do that work away from people. Then he continues to practice that and in his home and in different environments. And then he can start to take his dog to a cafe and the dog has an understanding of what's expected. So setting yourself up for success.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
So I'm aware that we're probably coming close to time, and I just wanted to squeeze in one last very selfishly motivated question.
Go for it.
I'm sure this must be like any time you go to a barbecue and anyone finds out what you do, you're oh God, all right, I'm on the clock. But this is kind of the flip side to the separation anxiety piece, which is, so post-COVID, now not working from home, but I freelance and I'm in a shared co-working space, and I've just moved into a new one a couple of weeks ago, and it's a dog friendly, it's all the Fitzroy things. It's dog friendly and which is amazing.
It's wonderful.
So there are kind of about 3 dogs already that exist in that space on different schedules.
Yeah.
And they're all great together. My dog Maggie sweetest baby angel in the whole world, perfect in every way. I just need to put that caveat in
My
place.
dog's really good, but
I mean, she's perfect, not really good, perfect.
She's perfect.
Okay, but there's clearly she's not having a bar of the other dog in this space. And it's clearly a dominance thing. There's an existing German Shepherd who's about 9 years old, Boston, who is a gorgeous, lovely old lady and is very sweet, but has strong alpha energy. And Maggie, who is usually chill, doesn't love dogs that are bigger than her, but is usually chill, is like, it's just basically, I think what I'm trying to ask is bringing her into the space. There's this complexity around territory that is different to if it was my home or Boston's home. It's now like a shared human space, but that doesn't work in dog language. And I'm aware that Maggie's the kind of newcomer. And I did, before coming in, I always take her off the lead so that she can manage herself and not add my anxiety to the dynamic. And I just try and not even look and let them sort it out. And I think they've kind of got it now to the point where there've been a few snarls and a few snaps. Now, Boston stays on her side of the studio. Maggie stays next to me, always looking at Boston. I try and make a point of not comforting Maggie because I don't want to reward her being antsy or anxiety, because there's nothing to be anxious about. So I kind of just keep at my computer, but she is under under me in a way that she doesn't do that in any other space. Any hot tips, please?
So firstly, I'm going to touch on a few things. So some of the things you've said, you're spot on. So not comforting a dog in an anxious state is, again, counterintuitive, but the right thing. We only want to give reinforcement or affection to our dog, or food or anything. We only want to give them a reward when they're in a confident state. So then the question is, well, how do I bring my dog into a confident state? And I'll just park that there for a second and go back to introducing dogs. Dogs going into a space with other dogs, very confronting for a dog. Firstly, a dog that is in a leader position in their relationship with their dog. So a dog that's in the door first, up the stairs first, and kind of scanning the environment. Full on anxious scenario for that dog going into a space where there are other dogs. So are we setting our dog up for success by bringing them into that space with unknown dogs? No, we're not. All right. So that's the first thing. The other thing is off lead. So there is a huge risk with letting a dog off lead to introduce themselves. If that German Shepherd, for whatever reason, didn't like your dog and went and corrected your dog, I don't know, I haven't even asked what the breed is, and it's not even relevant to this conversation. That could be a serious life-threatening event for your dog, but also for the German Shepherd for attacking your dog. So, so that's the first thing. And again, I have a question about whether or not these dogs are on or off lead in this space.
All off lead.
All off lead, yeah. So if they've got some synergy and there's a bit of a pack there, they're familiar. This is how, to answer the question of how do I introduce my dog to another dog, this is what you do. Firstly, you do not do it in the space where there is ownership and territory. So bring them out to a neutral space. So you might see, if the first time you bring your dog, I do this with every time I bring a dog into my house because I have dogs staying at my house. And so I get the owner to meet me outside. I did this just the other day with Lady. It's a big French Mastiff. As soon as I come out with Blossom, I just say, start walking. So she starts walking, I'm behind. I've got Blossom on the lead, she has Lady on the lead, and I'm slowly approaching. Now, in this state, Blossom is like trying to get ahead, and Lady's trying to look back towards Blossom. They're trying to do the dog greeting that most people do. Your dog nose to nose with my dog, and let's hope for the best, right? So whilst that's going on, each of us are focused on getting our dog into a calm follower state. So no, back with me. I want you to focus on me. This whole greeting thing that you think you're going to have is not going to happen. The energy of that dies down after 50 meters, 100 meters. I slowly approach, and now we're walking together. I'm not letting them interact. If they try to interact, follow us. It's not time for this. Then we walk. and we're bonding on that walk. There's humans leading and dogs following. All of that energy, that tense first interaction, which can go from like playful to like bites in seconds. It's a huge roll of the dice that is not worth it. So we bond the dogs. We build pack drive. We build like a sense of unity among them by walking, by migrating, which is a natural behavior for dogs when they're bonding. And then I can let them interact once the energy's down, kind of in a more neutral space. Or if they've really been on a nice walk together, I'll then come back in and then all the dogs go to their space on lead first.
Wow.
So that is how you can minimize the risk. Because I have dogs staying at my house, but it's Blossom's territory. I want to maximize the chance of them having a very successful bonding experience, because introducing a dog and they're going to go and smell Blossom's bed and smell her crate and go over here where she likes to rest. I need them to have some existing relationship and also know that it's the humans that are leading this show. You don't need to like manage your stuff. We'll provide that guidance. And so then bringing them back in, not only are you going to have exercise, relaxed, bonded dogs, but a lot of that potential for here's this new dog, who's she, what's she doing? Like all of that is like, oh, we've already met, we've walked together, we're all cool. Let's go. We're chill with each other now. Yeah.
So thank you. This is so like it's fascinating. Given that I've done literally everything wrong, does that still apply given that they've already had quite a jarring first kind of view? We just pick up from where we are now and just do this a few more times?
Yeah, totally. So what I would say is firstly, it's really important that you have a really good leadership relationship with your dog. So when you enter the space, you lead. When you enter up the stairs, you lead. Every new environment you go into, you do not allow her to go out. That's going to send a signal to her that she doesn't need to worry about her needs. You'll provide those for her. If a dog approaches, you keep her next to you or behind you, and you should be telling that other dog to give space. Don't go and greet these dogs while you've got your dog on leash. This can be quite confronting for her. We want your dog to feel advocated for by you taking leadership. So if a dog approaches me when I'm training a dog, I bring the dog on a short lead behind me and I'm moving into the space of the other dog and I'm pretty much just asking them to go away, because this is a strange dog approaching my dog. I don't know what their behavioural history, their background is, or their temperament. What's the advantage? My dog has a nice couple of seconds with the dog. What's the risk? Either dog gets bitten or has some kind of traumatic experience. It's just not worth it. But what I let my dog know is that you don't need to worry about these other dogs. I'll take care of that for you. All of a sudden, it's like the dog doesn't need to be reactive anymore. I'm taking on the job of security. So that's where the trust is built. That's where like the dog starts to trust me. I don't need to worry about this stuff. All these other dogs, like, are you okay with it? Okay. Well, I'm okay with it. But we need to show our dog that we're prepared to do that and we know how to do that. And again, it's hard. It's a skill. It needs to be learned, like to have the confidence to do that. But get those dogs walking together on lead. If I'd suggest like have your breaks together and you just have them on lead. Don't walk them all out at the same time, just one at a time, and you kind of stagger down the street and you just focus on your dog and you slowly bring that pack together and you just walk. Those dogs will be relaxed, they'll be bonded. Don't allow the dogs to do the whole dog dance where they're just in your context. That's what I'd suggest. Just walk them together and they'll bond.
Thank you. Yeah.
Let me know how you go.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Definitely.
To
and thank you. It is, like you say, it's often so counterintuitive to exactly what you think. I'm there being like, off lead, no pressure, let them smell each other's butts all they want, don't intervene. And I'm like, nope.
Yeah. And there's so much conflicting information around as well. Like I think of all of the varying things in those different sorts of approaches, training theories, exactly, that it's like nutrition, right? At some point you become overwhelmed. You're like, wait, do we like carbs or not? I can't remember. Pick a team.
You're right. You're 100% right. 100%.
It's been so, like, I could talk to you for another 10 hours. I'm not going to, but thank you so much, Jordan, for your time and your insights. And it's really fascinating and it's beautiful work that you do.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm thinking about this whole time. I'm like, I really need some activities, boundaries, and confident leadership. That would be great for my life.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Where can people find you?
At the moment, my website is chilledandfulfilled.com. You can also find me on Instagram at chilledandfulfilled. And that's it for now. I'll be starting TikTok and YouTube this year, and I'll hopefully have an app where people can watch videos and do training out in the field with their dog and learn. Basically, it's just going to be like modules of the things that I teach in person. But some people have the confidence to do it on their own, and so that's kind of that for them. So there'll be also discussion groups and things on there. So
it's so cool. I think there's so much space for learning about leadership, and it's like you learn it through and with your animal, but also there's so many bigger takeaways from these kinds of conversations, just about how we think about the energy we bring to any interaction.
Yeah, totally.
So, Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Jordan.
you. It's been so lovely to chat.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Thank you for listening to the Imposter Syndrome Club. Please follow us wherever you find your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra kind, rate and review. Or if you got any insights or value from this, share with a friend.
You can also find us on Instagram at ImposterPod or online at impostersyndromeclub.com.